I never expected to find my life unraveling over a forgotten jacket. There I was, standing in the bedroom, about to head out for one of the most important presentations of my career. I was an urban planner, and today was the day I was pitching my proposal for a new eco-friendly district in the city. But instead of focusing on my notes, I found myself holding Jamie's jacket, the one he'd tossed carelessly on the bed the night before. I'm Harper, by the way. 32, married to Jamie for 5 years, and until that moment, I thought I had a pretty good handle on my life. But as I reached into the jacket pocket, my fingers brushed against something unexpected. A phone. Not his usual one, mind you. This was a cheap burner phone. My heart skipped a beat as I unlocked it with a simple swipe. There were messages, all from one contact, labeled only with a heart emoji. The first message was innocuous enough, just a simple goodnight love. But as I scrolled further, the words became more intimate, more damning. My stomach twisted as I read the last message, sent just last night. I can't wait to see you again, Celeste. Celeste. My sister. The name hit me like a punch to the gut, leaving me breathless and swaying on my feet. I could barely process the betrayal, the sheer audacity of it. Jamie, my husband, and Celeste, the sister who'd always craved the spotlight, now secretly entwined in a way I couldn't even begin to fathom. I sat on the edge of the bed, the phone clutched tightly in my hand. I should have been angry, furious even, but all I felt was a cold numbness spreading through my chest. I knew I had to confront him, but not now, not with the presentation looming. I needed to focus, needed to put this aside, at least temporarily. Jamie walked in, his usual charming smile plastered across his face. Hey, you ready for today? I forced a smile, tucking the phone back into his jacket pocket. Yeah, just about. You. Of course. I'll be cheering you on from the sidelines, he said, leaning in for a quick peck on the cheek. I turned slightly, letting him kiss the air instead. He didn't seem to notice, or maybe he chose not to. As I left the house, my mind was a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. How long had this been going on? Why Celeste, of all people? The questions buzzed around my head like angry bees, and I had no answers. The presentation went by in a blur. I delivered my pitch, answered questions, and shook hands, all while feeling like I was watching someone else do it. My body moved on autopilot, my mind trapped in a loop of disbelief and betrayal. Later, back home, I waited for Jamie to return. I paced the living room, rehearsing what I would say, how I would confront him. But when he finally walked through the door, all my carefully planned words scattered like leaves in the wind. Harper, are you okay? You seem off, he said, concern lacing his voice. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. I found something today. In your jacket. His face paled slightly, a flicker of panic crossing his features. What do you mean? I held up the burner phone, watching as his eyes widened. This. Care to explain? Jamie opened his mouth, but no words came out. It was all the confirmation I needed. The silence stretched between us, heavy and oppressive. I don't know what to say, he finally murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. Try telling the truth, I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. He looked at me, a mixture of guilt and something else, maybe regret, shadowing his eyes. It just happened, Harper. I didn't mean for it to. I laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. It just happened. With my sister. The room fell silent again, the weight of his betrayal hanging between us like a storm cloud. I turned away, unable to look at him any longer. This was only the beginning, I realized. The beginning of something I hadn't planned for, hadn't wanted. But it was here, and I had to face it. As I stood there, my mind racing, I knew one thing for certain. This was far from over. The next morning, I found myself sitting at the kitchen table, staring at a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. The events of the previous day felt like a bad dream, one I couldn't quite shake off. Jamie had left early for work, leaving me alone with my thoughts and the growing sense of betrayal that gnawed at my insides. I decided it was time to face the music and call a family meeting. If there was one thing I'd learned from years of navigating the complexities of urban planning, it was that problems rarely solve themselves. I needed answers, and I needed them now. I called Theo first, knowing he'd be the easiest to convince. Hey, Can you come over later? We need to talk about something important. Theo didn't hesitate. Of course. Is everything okay? Not really, I admitted, trying to keep my voice steady. But I'll explain when you get here. Lucas took a little more persuasion. I've got a shift at the clinic, he said, sounding distracted. Please, Lucas. It's important. There was a pause, then a resigned sigh. All right. I'll be there. Finally, I called my parents. Evelyn answered, her voice warm and welcoming. Harper, darling. How's my favorite daughter? I winced at the unintended sting of her words. Can you and Dad come by this afternoon? I need to talk to everyone. Of course, dear. Is this about that big project of yours? No, I replied, my voice tight. It's personal. The hours dragged on until they arrived. Evelyn and Walter settled on the couch, their expressions a mix of curiosity and concern. Theo and Lucas sat across from them, exchanging glances that spoke volumes. I stood in front of them, feeling like I was about to present a case in court. Thanks for coming, I began, my hands clasped tightly in front of me. There's something I need to tell you all. Evelyn leaned forward, her brow furrowed. What is it, Harper? I took a deep breath, my heart pounding. Jamie is having an affair. With Celeste. The room fell silent, the weight of my words hanging in the air like a storm cloud. Walter shifted uncomfortably, while Evelyn's hand flew to her mouth in shock. Theo was the first to speak. Are you sure, Harper? I nodded, feeling the familiar sting of tears threatening to spill. I found a phone messages between them. It's true. Lucas looked at me, his eyes filled with empathy. I'm so sorry, Harper. I can't believe she would do this to you. Evelyn shook her head, disbelief etched on her face. There must be some misunderstanding. Celeste wouldn't. There's no misunderstanding. I cut in, my voice sharper than I intended. She did this. And Jamie, he didn't deny it. Walter sighed, rubbing his temples. This is complicated. Complicated. I echoed, incredulous. It's betrayal, plain and simple. Evelyn looked at me, her eyes pleading. Harper, you know how Celeste can be. Maybe she didn't mean to. Didn't mean to? I interrupted, my frustration boiling over. This isn't an accident, Mom. She's been seeing my husband behind my back. The room fell silent again, the tension thick and palpable. I could see the gears turning in their minds, trying to process the mess we found ourselves in. Theo cleared his throat, trying to break the silence. What do you want to do, Harper? I don't know yet, I admitted, feeling the weight of the decision pressing down on me. But I can't just ignore this. As the conversation continued, I noticed Evelyn and Walter exchanging glances, their expressions a mix of guilt and something else I couldn't quite place. It was then that I realized the depth of the fracture in our family, the unspoken favoritism that had always been there, lurking beneath the surface. Before we could delve deeper, the door swung open, and Celeste walked in, her usual confident stride faltering as she took in the scene. What's going on? I turned to face her, my heart pounding in my chest. We know, Celeste. About you and Jamie. She blinked, momentarily speechless, before her face hardened into a mask of defiance. So what if you do? The audacity of her response took my breath away. I watched as her eyes flicked to our parents, seeking some form of support or validation. Evelyn looked away, while Walter's expression remained unreadable. You can't just waltz in here and act like nothing happened, Theo said, his voice firm. Celeste crossed her arms, her posture defensive. I didn't plan this, Harper. It just happened. I shook my head, the anger giving way to a deep, aching sadness. You've always wanted what I have, Celeste. But this is too much. The room fell into silence once more, the weight of the situation settling heavily over us all. As I stood there, facing my sister, I realized that this was only the beginning of a long and painful journey, but I was determined to see it through, no matter what it took. The tension in the room was palpable, hanging heavy like a thick fog that refused to lift. I stood there, facing Celeste, my pulse a steady drumbeat in my ears. Her defiance was a slap in the face, but what came next shattered whatever fragile hope I had left for our relationship. I'm pregnant, Celeste announced, her voice cutting through the silence like a knife. The words hit me like a freight train, leaving me breathless and reeling. I felt the blood drain from my face, my hands trembling despite my efforts to keep them steady. I glanced around the room, taking in the shock mirrored in my brother's eyes, the disbelief etched on our parents' faces. Evelyn gasped, her hand flying to her chest. "Celeste, are you sure?" Celeste nodded, her expression unreadable. "I'm sure." Walter shifted in his seat, his voice a low rumble. "And Jamie is the father?" Celeste hesitated, then nodded again. "Yes." I struggled to process the revelation, my mind spinning with 1,000 thoughts and none at all. This was beyond betrayal. It was a complete upheaval of everything I thought I knew. I felt the room closing in around me, the walls pressing in as I fought to breathe. Theo broke the silence, his voice steady but tinged with anger. "How could you do this, Celeste?" To Harper, of all people. Celeste's eyes flashed, a hint of vulnerability breaking through her bravado. "I didn't plan this, Theo. It just happened." Lucas shook his head, disappointment heavy in his voice. "That's not an excuse, Celeste. You've hurt Harper more than you can imagine." I stood there, absorbing their words, my heart aching with a pain I couldn't describe. I wanted to scream, to cry, to lash out at the unfairness of it all. But instead, I just stood there, numb and silent. Evelyn turned to me, her eyes filled with a mix of sympathy and something else, perhaps a plea for understanding. "Harper, I know this is hard, but maybe we can find a way to work through this as a family." I laughed, a bitter sound that echoed in the room. "A family?" I repeated, incredulous. "This isn't a family, Mom. It's a mess." Walter cleared his throat, his expression stern. "We need to think about what's best for everyone involved." I shook my head, disbelief coursing through me. Everyone involved? What about me? What about what's best for me? The room fell silent again, the weight of the situation pressing down on all of us. I felt like I was drowning, struggling to keep my head above water in a sea of betrayal and broken promises. "I need some air," I muttered, turning on my heel and heading for the door. I didn't wait for a response, didn't care to hear whatever platitudes they might offer. I just needed to get out, to escape the suffocating confines of the room and the reality I found myself trapped in. Outside, the cool air hit my face, a welcome reprieve from the chaos inside. I took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm raging within me. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal, the sense of loss that threatened to overwhelm me. As I stood there, staring out into the distance, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, my heart sinking as I saw Jamie's name flash across the screen. I hesitated, my thumb hovering over the decline button, before finally answering. "Harper," he began, his voice filled with an emotion I couldn't quite place. "What do you want, Jamie?" I asked, my voice flat and devoid of warmth. "I heard from Celeste," he said, his words careful and measured. "I'm sorry." "Sorry," I repeated, my anger flaring. "You think sorry is enough?" There was a pause, then a sigh. "I know it's not, but I want to make things right." I laughed again, the sound harsh and unforgiving. "Make things right? You've got a funny way of showing it." "Please, Harper," he pleaded. "Can we just talk?" I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath to steady myself. "I don't know, Jamie. I don't know if I can ever forgive you." The line went silent, the weight of my words hanging between us. I ended the call, slipping the phone back into my pocket as I turned away from the house, the life I'd once known slipping further from my grasp. As I walked away, I realized that this was just the beginning of a long, painful journey toward healing and understanding, toward finding my own path amid the wreckage of what had been. And though I didn't know where it would lead, I was determined to find out. The decision to leave Jamie was both the hardest and easiest choice I'd ever made. Hard because of the love that once existed, easy because of the betrayal that had shattered it. That evening, I packed a suitcase with essentials, leaving behind the life we'd built together. As I zipped the bag, I felt a strange mix of freedom and fear. The weight of the unknown pressed heavily on my shoulders, but it was a burden I was willing to bear. I found refuge at Theo's place, his apartment a sanctuary from the chaos that had become my life. He welcomed me with open arms, no questions asked, offering the kind of unconditional support I desperately needed. "Stay as long as you need," Theo said, placing a comforting hand on my shoulder. Thanks, Theo. I don't know what I'd do without you, I replied, trying to muster a smile. We sat in silence for a while, the television murmuring softly in the background. I could feel his eyes on me, a silent offer of support, but I wasn't ready to talk about it. Not yet. The next day, I threw myself into work, seeking solace in the familiar rhythm of urban planning. My team was preparing for a major presentation, and the pressure was a welcome distraction from my personal turmoil. As I buried myself in blueprints and zoning laws, I felt a sense of control returning, a lifeline amid the storm. But life, as it often does, had other plans. It was late afternoon when Mason Reed, a colleague and friend, found me hunched over my desk, surrounded by papers and half-empty coffee cups. "Hey, Harper," he said, leaning against the doorframe. "You've been at it for hours. Want to grab a bite?" I hesitated, the idea of stepping away from work daunting, but Mason's easy smile and genuine concern were hard to resist. "Yeah, sure. I could use a break." We ended up at a small cafe around the corner, the kind with mismatched chairs and a menu scribbled on a chalkboard. We talked about work, the upcoming project, anything but the elephant in the room. But Mason, perceptive as ever, didn't let it slide for long. "You seem different, Harper." "Everything all right?" he asked, his tone gentle but probing. I sighed, stirring my coffee absent-mindedly. "It's been a rough few days." Mason nodded, waiting for me to continue. His patience was a balm, giving me space to find the words. "Jamie and Celeste," I finally said, the names tasting bitter on my tongue. "It's a mess." He didn't push for details, just nodded in understanding. "If you ever need to talk, I'm here." "Thanks, Mason." "I appreciate it," I replied, grateful for his presence. As we left the cafe, I felt a flicker of something I hadn't felt in days, hope. Maybe it was the warmth of a friend's support, or the realization that I wasn't as alone as I'd thought. Whatever it was, it gave me the strength to face what came next. Back at Theo's, I found a message waiting for me. It was from Evelyn, asking me to meet her and Walter at their house. The request was unusual, given our recent conversations, and it set my nerves on edge. But curiosity, and perhaps a lingering sense of duty, compelled me to go. When I arrived, the atmosphere was tense, the air thick with unspoken words. Evelyn and Walter sat across from me, their expressions a mix of concern and something else I couldn't quite place. "We've been thinking about everything," Evelyn began, her voice careful. "And we want to help." I raised an eyebrow, skepticism coloring my response. "Help? How?" Walter cleared his throat, a sign he was about to say something significant. "We've decided to support Celeste and Jamie financially." The words hung in the air, each syllable a blow to my fragile resolve. I stared at them, disbelief and betrayal warring within me. "You're what?" Evelyn reached for my hand, her touch both familiar and foreign. "We know this is hard, Harper, but they need us." I pulled my hand away, anger flaring. "And what about me? Do I not need support?" Walter sighed, his expression weary. "You're strong, Harper. You've always been strong." The implication was clear, and it stung more than I cared to admit. I stood up, the chair scraping loudly against the floor. "I can't believe this. You're choosing them over me." "It's not about choosing," Evelyn insisted, her voice pleading. But it was. It always had been. I turned away, my heart heavy with the weight of their decision. As I walked out, I realized that my understanding of family, loyalty, and justice was shifting. The lines were blurring, and I was left to navigate the murky waters on my own terms. The days following my parents' decision to support Celeste and Jamie were a blur of anger and disbelief. I poured myself into work, seeking refuge in the meticulous details of urban planning. It was the only thing that made sense, the only place where I felt in control. One afternoon, as I was sketching out a new layout for a community park, my phone buzzed with a message from Lucas. "Hey, can we meet?" "I think we need to talk." I agreed, and we met at a small park near his clinic. The air was crisp, the sun casting long shadows as it dipped toward the horizon. Lucas was already there, sitting on a bench, his face thoughtful as he watched a group of children play nearby. "Thanks for coming," he said as I approached. "Of course. What's up?" I asked, trying to sound casual. He hesitated, then said, "I've been thinking about everything, and I think you should know something." The seriousness in his voice set me on edge. "What is it, Lucas?" He took a deep breath, his gaze steady. "Celeste isn't just pregnant. She's been struggling financially for a while now. Jamie's been helping her out, which is why they got close." I blinked, processing the information. "So this wasn't just about an affair?" Lucas shook his head. "No, it seems like it started as them trying to figure things out. But then it escalated." The revelation added another layer to the tangled web of betrayal. It didn't excuse their actions, but it complicated my feelings. I felt a pang of guilt, wondering if I'd been too focused on my own hurt to see the bigger picture. Why didn't they just ask for help? I asked, my voice tinged with frustration. Pride, maybe. Or shame. "I don't know, Harper," Lucas replied, his expression pained. "But I thought you should know." I nodded, gratitude and confusion swirling within me. "Thanks, Lucas. I appreciate you telling me." As we sat there in silence, I realized that my understanding of justice was shifting. It wasn't just about retribution for the wrongs done to me. It was about understanding the complexities of human motivations and the gray areas that often went unnoticed. Later that evening, I found myself at a crossroads. Mason had invited me to a gallery opening, a chance to step away from the chaos and enjoy something beautiful. I hesitated, unsure if I was ready to let someone new into my life, even as a friend. But Mason's quiet persistence was hard to resist, and I agreed to go. The gallery was bustling with people, the walls adorned with vibrant paintings that seemed to pulse with life. Mason greeted me with a warm smile, his presence a calming balm against the backdrop of my turbulent thoughts. As we wandered through the exhibits, Mason's easy conversation and genuine interest in the art helped me relax. I found myself laughing at his dry humor, the tension in my shoulders easing for the first time in days. We stopped in front of a particularly striking piece, a swirling mass of colors that seemed to capture the chaos and beauty of life. Mason turned to me, his expression thoughtful. "You know, art is a lot like life. It's messy, unpredictable, but sometimes you find something beautiful in the chaos." His words resonated with me, echoing the thoughts I'd been grappling with. "I think you're right," I replied, my voice softer than I intended. As the evening wore on, I realized that I didn't have to face everything alone. Mason's presence, though new, was a reminder that there were people who cared, who were willing to stand by me as I navigated the murky waters of my life. But just as I began to feel a semblance of peace, my phone buzzed with a message from Theo. "Emergency family meeting. You need to come." My heart sank, the fragile calm I'd found shattering as I excused myself and headed to Theo's apartment. The atmosphere was tense when I arrived, everyone gathered with expressions of concern and urgency. "What's going on?" I asked, my voice edged with worry. Theo exchanged a glance with Lucas before speaking. "Mom and Dad have decided to mortgage their house to help Celeste and Jamie." The words hit me like a punch to the gut, the implications crashing over me like a tidal wave. "They what?" "They think it's the only way to keep everyone afloat," Lucas added, his tone apologetic. I felt the room spin, the ground shifting beneath my feet. This was more than just a betrayal. It was a complete upheaval of everything I thought I knew about family and loyalty. As I stood there, grappling with the enormity of the situation, I realized that my journey was far from over. I would have to dig deeper, find strength I didn't know I had, and redefine what justice and family truly meant to me. The weight of my parents' decision to mortgage their home settled over me like a thick, suffocating fog. Each breath felt heavy, each thought tangled in a web of betrayal and disbelief. I sat alone in Theo's living room, the silence pressing in around me, a stark contrast to the chaos in my mind. Theo and Lucas had tried to offer comfort, their words of support like lifelines tossed into the stormy sea I found myself adrift in. But their reassurances, though well-intentioned, felt hollow against the enormity of what I faced. My family, the very foundation of my life, had chosen a path that left me isolated and questioning everything I thought I knew. The next day, as I walked into work, I felt a strange detachment from the world around me. My colleagues greeted me with their usual smiles, but I could barely muster a response. I was a ghost, moving through the motions of my life, haunted by the betrayal that had upended everything. Mason found me at my desk, his concern evident in the way he lingered in the doorway. "Harper, can we talk?" I nodded, though my heart wasn't in it. We walked to a nearby cafe, the familiar setting a stark contrast to the turmoil inside me. "Is everything okay?" Mason asked, his voice gentle but probing. I hesitated, unsure of how to put my feelings into words. "It's just, everything's a mess, Mason." He nodded, his understanding palpable. "I'm here if you need anything. You don't have to go through this alone." His offer was genuine, and I felt a flicker of gratitude amid the despair. But even Mason's kindness couldn't erase the reality of my situation. My family was crumbling, and I had no idea how to put the pieces back together. As we left the cafe, my phone buzzed with a message from Jamie. "Can we meet? I need to talk to you." I felt a surge of anger, the audacity of his request igniting the simmering resentment within me. But curiosity and perhaps a lingering sense of unfinished business compelled me to agree. We met at a park, the setting eerily reminiscent of happier times. Jamie stood by a bench, his expression a mix of guilt and something else I couldn't quite place. "Thanks for coming," he began, his voice tentative. "What do you want, Jamie?" I asked, my tone sharper than I intended. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I know I've messed up, but I want to make things right." I laughed, a bitter sound that echoed in the still air. "Make things right? You've done nothing but make things worse." He flinched, the truth of my words hitting home. "I know, but I'm trying to fix it." "Fix it?" I repeated, incredulous. "You've destroyed everything, Jamie. There's no fixing this." His shoulders sagged, defeat etched into his features. "I'm sorry, Harper. I really am." The sincerity in his voice was unexpected, but it did little to soothe the raw wound of betrayal. "Sorry doesn't change anything." We stood there in silence, the weight of our shared history pressing down on us. I felt a pang of sadness for what we'd lost, but it was quickly overshadowed by the reality of our situation. As I turned to leave, Jamie's next words stopped me cold. "Celeste is considering giving up the baby." I froze, the implications of his statement crashing over me like a tidal wave. "What?" "She's overwhelmed, Harper. She doesn't know what to do," he explained, his voice filled with a mix of desperation and regret. The revelation added a new layer of complexity to an already tangled web. It was a twist I hadn't anticipated, one that made the situation feel even more hopeless. I felt the ground shift beneath me, the fragile foundation of my life crumbling further. Back at Theo's, I sat in the darkened living room, the enormity of everything pressing down on me. My family was fractured, my marriage in ruins, and now this new complication threatened to unravel what little resolve I had left. As I sat there, the themes of revenge and justice that had driven me began to blur, their edges softened by the harsh realities of life. I realized that I was at a crossroads, faced with a choice that would define not only my future but the future of those around me. In that moment of darkness, I understood that true strength lay not in seeking revenge, but in finding a way to move forward, to build something new from the ashes of what had been. It was a daunting task, but one I was determined to face head-on, no matter the cost. The air was thick with tension as I stood on the threshold of my parents' home, preparing for what I knew would be a pivotal confrontation. The weight of their choices, the betrayal, and the tangled web of emotions had led us to this moment. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what lay ahead, and pushed open the door. Inside, the atmosphere was charged, a storm of unspoken words and unresolved conflicts. Celeste sat on the couch, her expression a mix of defiance and vulnerability. Jamie stood nearby, his posture tense, while Evelyn and Walter hovered uncertainly, caught between their daughters. "Thank you for coming, Harper," Evelyn began, her voice a strained attempt at warmth. I nodded curtly, my gaze fixed on Celeste. "We need to talk." Celeste met my eyes, her bravado faltering. "I know." Jamie shifted uncomfortably, his presence a constant reminder of the betrayal that had shattered my world. "We all need to talk," he added, his voice barely above a whisper. I took a seat, the silence stretching between us like a chasm. "You're considering giving up the baby," I stated, my words more accusation than question. Celeste flinched, her facade cracking. I don't know what else to do, Harper. Everything's falling apart. I felt a flicker of sympathy, but it was quickly overshadowed by the anger and hurt that had defined the past weeks. You made choices, Celeste. Choices that affected all of us. I know, she admitted, her voice small. But I didn't mean for it to get this far. Jamie stepped forward, his expression earnest. We're trying to fix things, Harper. We really are. I laughed, the sound bitter and sharp. Fix things? You've done nothing but make them worse. Evelyn interjected, her tone pleading. Harper, please. We need to find a way forward. I turned to her, the weight of their decision to mortgage the house pressing heavily on my mind. And what about you? You're risking everything for them. Walter sighed, his voice weary. We're trying to help, Harper. It's what families do. Is it? I challenged, my voice rising. Because it feels like you're choosing them over me. The room fell silent, the truth of my words hanging in the air. I could see the conflict in their eyes, the struggle to reconcile their actions with the consequences. As the tension reached a breaking point, an unexpected voice cut through the silence. Mason had arrived, his presence a steadying force amid the chaos. Maybe we're looking at this the wrong way, he suggested, his tone calm but firm. I turned to him, surprised by his intervention. What do you mean? Mason stepped forward, addressing the room. This isn't just about who did what. It's about what happens next. You all have a chance to make things right, but it starts with honesty. His words resonated, a beacon of clarity in the storm. I realized that revenge and justice weren't the only paths forward. There was room for understanding, for finding a way to rebuild. Celeste looked at me, her eyes filled with a mix of regret and hope. I'm sorry, Harper. Truly. I nodded, the anger that had fueled me beginning to ebb. I know. Jamie spoke up, his voice steady. We want to do better. For the baby, for all of us. I took a deep breath, the enormity of their words settling over me. This was the moment, the chance to redefine what family meant, to build something new from the ashes of what had been. I can't promise anything, I said, my voice firm but open. But I'm willing to try. The relief in the room was palpable, a collective exhale that signaled the beginning of a new chapter. It wouldn't be easy, and the road ahead was fraught with challenges, but it was a start. As we sat together, discussing the future and the steps we needed to take, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in weeks. The themes of revenge and justice had evolved, giving way to understanding and the possibility of redemption. Mason's presence was a steady reminder that I wasn't alone, that there were people willing to stand by me as I navigated the complexities of life. As the conversation continued, I realized that the journey was far from over, but I was ready to face it with courage and hope. The days following the confrontation at my parents' house felt like a slow exhale after holding my breath for too long. The air was clearer, the path ahead not entirely free of obstacles, but at least visible. I found myself back at work, the steady rhythm of urban planning offering a welcome sense of normalcy. My projects, once a refuge, were now a testament to my resilience and growth. Mason and I had found a comfortable rhythm, his presence a steadying force in my life. We spent evenings exploring the city, discovering hidden gems and quiet corners that allowed us to talk and connect. Our conversations were easy, filled with laughter and understanding, a balm for the wounds that still lingered. One evening, as we sat on a park bench watching the sunset, Mason turned to me, his expression thoughtful. You've come a long way, Harper. I nodded, the truth of his words settling over me. It hasn't been easy, but I think I'm finally finding my way. He smiled, a warm, reassuring presence. You're stronger than you know. His words were a reminder of the journey I'd undertaken, the challenges I'd faced and overcome. I realized that my understanding of family, loyalty, and justice had evolved, shaped by the trials and tribulations of the past months. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the world in shades of gold and pink, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in a long time. The chaos that had once defined my life was giving way to something new, something hopeful. A few days later, I received a letter from my parents. The envelope was simple, unassuming, but the contents held the weight of 1,000 conversations left unsaid. Inside, a handwritten note from Evelyn and Walter expressed their regret. their desire to rebuild our relationship on new terms. We've made mistakes, Harper. We see that now. We want to make things right if you'll let us. The letter read. I sat with their words, the sincerity and vulnerability evident in each line. It was an olive branch, a chance to redefine what family meant, not just for me, but for all of us. I knew it wouldn't be easy. That trust would take time to rebuild, but the possibility of healing was a powerful motivator. As I pondered their offer, I felt a sense of closure beginning to take shape. The themes of revenge and justice that had once driven me were now tempered by understanding and compassion. I realized that true strength lay not in holding on to past grievances, but in finding a way to move forward, to build something new from the remnants of what had been. In the weeks that followed, I reached out to Celeste and Jamie, tentative steps toward reconciliation. Our conversations were cautious, filled with the weight of our shared history, but there was a willingness to listen, to understand. Celeste had started therapy, a step toward healing that spoke of her desire to change. One afternoon, as I sat with Theo and Lucas, the sun streaming through the windows, I felt a sense of gratitude for the support they'd offered throughout my journey. Their unwavering presence had been a lifeline, a reminder that I wasn't alone. "You've been amazing, you know that?" I said, my voice filled with warmth. Theo shrugged, a smile playing on his lips. "We're family, Harper. That's what we do." Lucas nodded, his eyes reflecting the same sentiment. "We're proud of you. For everything." Their words were a balm, soothing the lingering ache of past wounds. I realized that family wasn't just about blood, but about the connections we choose, the people who stand by us when the world feels like it's falling apart. As the story of my life continued to unfold, I knew that the journey was far from over. There would be challenges ahead, moments of doubt and uncertainty, but I was ready to face them with courage and hope. The resolution wasn't perfect, nor was it complete. There were still questions, lingering uncertainties that would take time to unravel. But the foundation was there, a new beginning built on the lessons of the past, the promise of a future defined by love, understanding, and the strength to move forward. In the end, I realized that the true measure of justice wasn't in retribution, but in the ability to forgive, to find peace amid the chaos, and to embrace the possibility of redemption and growth. It was a journey I was proud to have undertaken, one that had taught me the true meaning of resilience and the power of family.